Hey everyone, in this video, this is going to be our complete training for the skid steer. So we get a lot of requests to try and combine all of our videos into one to make it easier. So check it out. What we've done is we've combined this into basically 4 sections, and we'll put the timestamps below if you want to fast forward to one. The first is our pre-op of the skid steer. The second will be our basic controls, or kind of beginner overview. Third will be our more advanced skills. And then our fourth and final is kind of shut down parking portion. So again, we'll cover all of those pieces in this video. Okay everyone, we're going to start with a pre-op inspection, probably the most important part of operating equipment and also the most overlooked. You don't have to be an expert, don't have to be a diesel mechanic, do a good pre-op. A lot of it's just basic. You know, if it doesn't look right, you need to look into it further. So a couple of things, first and foremost for these videos, I want to thank Precision Landscape in Hastings. They actually were using their John Deere 325 skid steer for these. One other thing, I'll be using a handheld camera. This is something new. We've had a lot of requests in our videos, people wanting to get close-ups. So hopefully this will help. But let us know what you think in the comments below, how this turns out. So with that said, our pre-ops, if you've seen my other videos, I try and be consistent. That's the only thing I can tell operators. Get in a routine. My way is not necessarily the right way. It's just the way I do it. Find your way and stick with it. So I separate my pre-ops into 3 pieces. One is my general walk around. That's just, I don't touch anything. It's just the biggest, when you look big picture, see if there's anything obvious that might look damaged, and we'll do that walk around. The number 2 is compartments. So that's where I start opening compartments, anything that I need to get in there to look at fluids. And then the third and final is in the operator seat. That's when I'm actually getting the piece of equipment. Again, those are the 3 things I do in all my pre-ops. It allows me to walk around twice, which I think is important. So with that said, let's go ahead. The first thing is going to be the walk around. Now, if I start on the front of my equipment here, again, generally you're just looking for anything that sticks out, anything obvious, any obvious damage. I like to kind of like reading a book, left to right, top to bottom. You know, I start at the top, look if there's any damage on the window, the rollover protection, the cage, basically the whole system that protects the operator, and to see if I see any damage. I'm also coming up, and that's where I'm looking at to see if there's any damage to any of the cylinders or anything. So a lot of times when you look at, you know, stuff like this, if there's any damage to the cylinder there, this is where I'm making sure all the connections are complete. Like you can see right here, there is a big old rock right in there. Sometimes it's good like that, just to get rid of that while we can. So I'm looking at any of those, and I'm looking at any of the hoses here to make sure if there's any issues or anything like that, the connections. Coming around here as I'm looking, top to bottom. So again, all the hoses and connections, all the lines are in here. You never want to check a hydraulic line by hand, just because if you move that and it were to burst, it's under a lot of pressure. But I'm looking at all those connections to make sure there's no leaks, nothing obvious. This is also a good time to see if you're for greasing. You can see really easily how, if it looks greased or not, if it looks dry or not, something you might need to address. Then I'm coming down and I'm looking at the track system. So anything obvious on this, you know, you're looking at the rollers, making sure there's nothing obvious on any of them, any damage, anything stuck in there. The drive system, the sprocket there. If I see any uneven wear on the teeth there, that's something I would want to look into further. And just the overall tension of the track itself. You know, is it appropriate sag in there? You can tighten these by opening this compartment. You'd grease it, but it'd only be if there'd be a lot of sag in there. So I'm just seeing, you know, if anything looks damaged, if there's any leaks from the drive motor at all, that would be something you'd want to look at further. As I continue, coming around the back, and again, you've got more hoses here. All the connections, all the hydraulics. You can get a good picture down the side here of all the lines, and that's if I see anything leaking, anything bulging, looks like it's damaged. You're gonna wanna look at that. You're looking at all the connection points, where the bolts are, the pins, everything like that. And again, same thing with grease. I'm looking to make sure nothing looks overly dry or anything like that. Across the back, looking at the top. Again, seeing the cab is not damaged, nothing's wrong then with the exhaust system. We got our air intake, if there's any damage there. And again, looking down, I can see my fan, my radiator fan, if there's any damage to the fins or anything like that. You can kind of see through there, and I'm looking for any damage, anything like that. And then finally, just going down low. A lot of times, I tell people, just look underneath. You can see on the inside of the tracks, but also see if there's any leaks. Anything that might be obvious you might need to look at further. Continuing going around, again, I'm starting at the top, looking up, no damage to anything there. I can again grease there. I can look at my lines. Same thing down the side here. Checking the lines, no bulge, no damage, nothing like that. And continuing to look around, same thing with the tracks over here. Seeing if there's anything obvious to any of the rollers, anything that could be damage in there, anything that doesn't look like they're moving, they're locked up, you can see. And then your teeth on your sprocket there, making sure there's no damage to that, no leaks to the drive motor. Tracks look the appropriate amount of sag in them, they don't look too loose. And then continuing around the front. Again, the bucket, I'm looking at the cutting edge, seeing if this is all worn down, that's where you're gonna wanna consider replacing that before it actually gets to the bucket itself. Like you can actually see on this one, this edge is a lot more worn than the other side. It's still fine, it was just something we were gonna wanna monitor on it. And then obviously if the bucket itself, if you see any damage, anything like that. And then I'm looking at the front. Any damage, anything like that on the front of the skid, see if there's any damage there. Going down, looking in here, again, this is where a lot of debris, you saw I pulled out a rock, but while I'm here, again, looking at all these lines, seeing if there's always gonna be rocks and things in there, but just make sure there's nothing larger that might be damaged. This is my quick attach here, making sure no damage, the cylinder, it looks good, everything like that. And that's my general walk around. So after the walk around, then I'm gonna go to compartments. It's really for the skid steer, it's pretty simple, it's just the engine compartment. So we'll walk around that side. While I'm walking, the one thing on the walk around, which this kind of goes between either compartments or walk around, is my hydraulic fluid level. The tank fill, if you see, is right there. I don't know if you can see, but it's right. You just want to be in between the two marks and making sure that's appropriate there. So now opening the hood on this thing. So this is the engine compartment. First thing, again, I always just try and look at anything obvious that sticks out. If I see any damage, anything like that, any wires, things like that. But then you've got your coolant check right here. Again, same thing. It's got a cold minimum, maximum right there. So we're right there is appropriate. We have got, this is the air filter. Normally you would take this out weekly and clean it. But almost all these air filters have a little discharge. I'm gonna see if you can get in there to see it. See how I pinch that? When I pinch that, that's kind of if anything larger, or if there's a lot of debris that's in there. A lot of times that's a good indicator too if you need to pull that filter out. If you open this and you see a ton of dust, dirt, debris come out of that, that means that's all in there as well. So you're gonna wanna clean that out. There's our hydraulic oil. Again, we already checked the level on there, and then our engine oil. So I'm gonna check the engine oil. Generally for this, and just making sure it's right there on the right levels there, if that looked good. And then outside of that, again, you're looking at the intake system for the air intake, everything else in there. Seeing if there's just anything obvious you can see for damage, any of the belts, anything like that might be damaged, but everything looks, I don't see anything obvious that sticks out to me. Again, you don't need to be a mechanic, but as long as you can see there's no damage. We already kind of looked at the radiator fins, but then you can actually see, or the fan fins, the radiators behind it, if there's any damage to the coils or anything like that. And then we're good there. And then the final piece will be getting in the operator seat. Finally, getting in the operator seat here, 3 points of contact, getting in. And it's pretty simple for this. Pull this, you always have to have lock lever down. I just like to turn, again, for the John Deere, if I click this once, turns the system on. I'm looking for any error messages, anything up there that might indicate I cannot start it. And then I am just holding that to start it. So after that, I'm just seeing if there are any indicators. This is basically parking brakes open, on, my door is open, but I'm not getting any warning indicators. That's where you're getting indicators there. The other thing I'm doing is just listening to the engine. A lot of times I like to start it, have the door open, listen. You're gonna see if you hear something that might not sound right. And then the final thing is just checking my fluids, making sure I got enough fuel in the system to operate for the day, things like that. So that's how you complete a pre-op inspection on a skid steer. Next portion here, this is our basic controls, kind of beginner level. So really just going over the fundamental overview of a skid steer. Again, we're using a John Deere 325 today. But again, I try and do our training videos where it's going to pretty much cross over to most different types of skid steer. So first things first, 3 points of contact. You know, safety is always number one. So these things are actually kind of awkward to get into. So you make sure when you open, first of all, your bucket's going to have to be down all the time in order to open the door. But then it's 3 points of contact. There's little steps there in the handlebars. Make sure you take your time getting in these things. Okay, after you're in, seatbelt first. Can't stress how important it is for a seatbelt. A lot of operators, they don't wear them. I just tell you, it is what it is. You're in a rollover cab. It ain't going to work if you're not secured to it. You're just going to bounce around inside of it. So with these skid steers, generally you have a safety bar. They're either two flaps on some, the bigger ones, or these are just it almost looks like a roller coaster. So you're going to pull this down in front of you. It's kind of like a parking brake. The machine is not going to do anything with that thing up. So once it's down, so with the John Deere, and I'm going to, again, we started doing this. We're going to use a handheld camera in here to kind of cut to some close-ups because we had some feedback that you guys wanted to see close-ups. So on these, the John Deere these are keyless actually start. So if I click once on there and then just hold that, it's going to start. As I'm doing that, I'm looking, this is my indicators up there. I'm making sure that I've got if I had any system issues, I'm going to see it up there. But right now there's no issues there. With a skid steer, they start with a parking brake on. So you saw that. Again, my parking brake here on the John Deere is this little button. You see the P. It also has my hydraulic release. So they're automatically going to come on every single time. Obviously a stop button at the end when I want to turn it off. But when that button's on, what you'll notice is nothing, if I try and move anything, you hear it beeps at me because it's in park. So that's when everything's safe. Also, if I take that off right now, if I am to flip this up, it automatically sets it on. So that's why this is kind of your safety right there. But again, so I'm all the way down, parking brake's on, nothing's gonna work. So biggest things with safety, you got the parking brake, seat belt, and the safety lock lever, the bar right in front of you. You wanna make sure those are in place. Well, really, they have to be in place, otherwise the machine's not gonna operate. Now, with the control pattern, there's a few different, there's a lot of different control patterns actually. The most common ISO controls, where your right is your boom and bucket, your left is all your driving. That's probably the most common. I believe it's the easiest if you're trying to learn. But they also have an H pattern that I call them Bobcat controls. That's mainly because I've seen them in Bobcat. Bobcat is also the only one I've ever seen has foot controls. It's like an H pattern with foot controls where your feet will actually operate. On the more simpler, the ones I like, again, almost all newer ones will have switches right there, and I'll kind of go over some of these in the John Deere one. So if you look right here and you see it's got my control pattern, I'm on ISO, H pattern. This is F for feet, but I don't have that. It'll actually skip over it because it doesn't exist in this, because I don't have, the only foot pedal I have down here is my throttle. There's a manual throttle right there. So that's what controls your throttle. Otherwise, that's just a footrest over on that side. If you had foot pedals, you'd actually see two pedals that you could actually engage. That would be for the boom and bucket. Now again, I'm going to go over the standard controls just because I think that's the easiest. And honestly, I couldn't even, you put me in an H pattern, I'm going to look like I'm trying to ride a bike backwards. It's like you learn one way and that's kind of the way. It's also the most that crosses over with an excavator, a wheel loader. That's kind of why I like consistency. So I would recommend that pattern on there. These other buttons, if you go through, again, these are so kind of specific to John Deere. They're not all going to be the same, but I would say everyone's going to have something similar. In this John Deere, this is a sensitivity. These are both sensitivity. This is for the joysticks for driving. This is for your bucket. For basically, if you adjust these, it's how, I don't know it's how sensitive the controls are. So if you want to be really finesse, you put it down. They come standard with two. Honestly, I don't ever manipulate those, so I would recommend sticking there. This is your throttle. You can actually make it a decelerator, which is kind of cool. So right now, if I hit that, you'll hear the engine go up. If I do this, there is a manual throttle on these, and now it's reversed. If I use that pedal, it actually brings it down. It's like a decelerator. I'm gonna go back. It's a lot like a bulldozer. I don't like it personally. For a skid steer, I use it manual. I control the accelerator up and down, but again, it's up to you. Control patterns we talked about. This is a ride control, and this is a auto, basically an auto level on the bucket. So, and then up top here, we've got this is our quick attach. We'll go over lights. Auxiliary, if we had that, you can reverse the fan on if you had a lot of dust, you want to blow out the fan. And then your climate control up there. And there's always these anytime you get in a machine, they're almost always going to have things like that up there. I'm trying to think. Over on the left, you got backup camera, and there's a bunch of menu things I'm not going to go into. Same thing as your panel, fuel, and then warnings, and then your stereo right there. So those are the main controls. I'm trying to think of anything else. Wiper is always on the door, things like that. Now, showed you all those. Now let's go over basic. Now, to get this working, take the parking brake off. I just click that red P up there, and the lights will go off on it. So your right is your boom and bucket. So if I pull this back right now, it's going to raise the boom up. Go about halfway up here. That's that. If I go right hand to the right, it's going to open the bucket. If I go right hand to the left, it's going to close the bucket. And then right hand forward is going to bring it back down. Now typically driving position, I always, these will come right down to ground level. Typically if you are traveling any distance, you're gonna wanna have it up a little bit, otherwise you're dragging the bottom of it. It's only when you're grading, things like that, we want it all the way down, so you wanna keep it up a little bit. So that's our right joystick, is your boom and bucket controls. The left is your driving, and this is why I like this control pattern. They're extremely simple, these ISO control patterns. Basically if I push forward, it goes forward. Back, back, left, left, right, right. It's that simple. And then if I go slowly forward and to the right, it's going to go that direction. So again, they're very intuitive and easy to use. Obviously, anytime backing up, know where your mirrors are. I've got the backup camera there, and I've also got a big old mirror right up above my head that, again, make sure you always have this position. There's going to be always a mirror there. And then again, most equipment nowadays has backup cameras. Just make sure you know where those are. So that's again, right is boom bucket, left is your steering on there. There are a bunch of buttons on these. These would be if you had accessory, hydraulics, things like that. There's a trigger on the John Deere, and this is actually common in cat and everything I've seen. You'll see that little rabbit up there. I'm clicking the trigger. It's basically a 2-speed. Most, well, actually not most. A lot of skid steers are 2-speed. So if you click that, it'll put you into a faster speed setting. And on the right, same thing on this. These would be hydraulics. If you had like an auger on there, this would be the accessory flow. And there's just a lot of, right now when you're in basic mode, it's not gonna do anything. This one has a trigger 2 on there. For the John Deere, this actually triggers you'll see right here, I've got a ride control and then the auto level. This will switch between the two if I click the trigger. If I have 2 lights on it, it means it's on. So it'll tell me one way or the other. Basics there. So now let's go ahead and try and go get a scoop. I am just going to go over here. Now, biggest thing with skid steers, they're smaller and people think they're safer. I would actually say the opposite. I think they're actually can get a lot of trouble really quickly with the skid steer because they are smaller. So I'm going to go over some basics here, but really you drive up, you see how I dropped it all the way down so it stops? Almost always you're going to start from ground level, and then you're just rolling that blade. If I go right and right until I can see that front blade is flat on the ground. Then I'm just driving into my pile. Again, there's 2 ways for throttle. I generally like to save fuel. I think it's easier if you just use your manual. That's gonna give more power to go faster. It's gonna make your hydraulics more powerful, things like that. So I give it a little bit of throttle, I go in, and then I'm curling that up. Same thing as I would do in a loader if I can keep kind of driving in and pulling it up if I want a really full bucket. And then I've got a nice full bucket. And back up a little bit. Now again, I have auto level on this thing right now, so that's if I pull this thing back, you'll see from a distance that it's actually curling away from me, which is a good thing. Now I can still override that. So it's not completely dummy proof for a new operator. You'll see if I keep curling that, you'll see there's some dirt coming over the back, and I'm not gonna dump it all on the nice top of this nice skid steer. So that's one, you can do it manually. The other thing I think you can screw it up yourself is what I should say. And then you'll notice that's where I have right now, you saw this was on. If I turn that off, that is that auto level. So what that does is it won't do it anymore. Now let me curl it all the way up. That bucket will not move if I'm not doing anything to the bucket, if I'm just pulling back on it. So I'm gonna naturally do it. A lot of older machines don't have the auto level, and this is where I find a lot of people, newer operators, get in trouble because they can't see the bucket. So you see my vantage point right here. It's tough to really see the angle on that. So that's why it's really, a lot of operators, they actually curl it right here and they're gonna dump it right over their roof. And if you're not in a cab, it's gonna get really messy. So, bring it back down. I'm gonna engage that back on. You almost always wanna have it on if you have the option. Raise it up. Now this is where machines are very top heavy. So you generally wanna be low and tight to the ground if you're traveling with it. And then you're gonna inch forward. And then to dump it, right hand to the right. And I'm gonna dump it. Sometimes you're gonna shake it out there a little bit if you got material that's sticking in there. And then back up, looking behind me, mirror. So that's basics. Again, I'll do one more scoop here. And also trying, if you're traveling any distance, you're trying to shake that in the bucket. If you overfill your bucket too much, you're gonna spill material over. So as I drive around, and then again, the biggest thing here, I'm off the ground a little bit. And then I'm actually just driving forward, low and tight to the ground. Whenever you're traveling, this is where I can kick it into high speed if I want, the rabbit. I did put the ride control on. I'm gonna turn back around, go the other way. You'll notice on the ride control, if you see my boom arm from the outside moving up and down, that's because that ride control is on. It's really nice in the newer machines that have that. It takes away some of that bounce. Backing up. And then slowly raising it up. And dumping. Okay, those are the basic controls. Now, a couple other things we're gonna go over. Okay, the next thing is floating the blade. So there is an option, you can disengage the hydraulics. For a John Deere, if I set it flat, and if as I'm coming down, I click this trigger, it'll basically disengage the hydraulics. And you'll feel it where it's not, if you push down, it's not gonna do anything. So there's two ways to do this. Right now, I just got my bucket flat, and if I just go back like that, I'm basically just using the bottom of the bucket to flatten out there. I didn't get much there because I didn't have it all the way open. The other way that's probably a more effective, for this at least. Same thing if I set it down, but instead of going flat. Flat, well, if I had a full bucket, I could actually use it compact. So if I go down and then roll it up like this, this is where, if you see, I can actually see behind the blade. I rolled it enough so I can see. And it's almost like using it like a dozer blade. You'll see my arms going up and down. Again, watching where I'm going here. But this is kind of a rougher cut there that'll go through. And then at the end of this, I'm just popping it out of float so I can back up at the same time and generally try and let that trail off without leaving a big mound. Again, we'll go in the next video, we'll go over a little bit more grading, but that's just the float feature. I like to show people that. And then the final piece is just disengaging, you're using a quick attach. So again, depending on what equipment, most of the newer skids will have a quick attach feature. Some are manual, where you get out and you look at these red pins. I'm gonna curl this. If you see on this one, right, there's little red tabs right there. The one actually on the left is broken off at the very end, but you can still see it. So on that, all I'm doing is, you always wanna make sure you're curled all the way. And then on the John Deere, there is a little disconnect there. So I just hold that in, and you can see that if I give it a little bit of throttle, you see those red pins are popping up. That means we're disconnected. So you only just hold that in until it's disconnected. Now what I can do is I can set it down, and then I just start rolling that blade away from me. Like that, and then back off. So you can see that's how you disconnect it. And if you sometimes it's good to roll this up. So if you look underneath, I can see the pins right there. And that's where the same thing, if I push this button up here, I'll actually see those pins pop out. the hydraulics coming out, and then I can actually push it back to release them. Again, I always like people to see the functionality of their machine, so that's that. So right now I'm open. You see the red is exposed there. It means I'm disconnected. And then to connect, I don't have forks here today, but again, same thing with the bucket. Whatever you're going to attach, they all have the same plate here to attach to. Just kind of working it in there. You're uncurling your bucket and going forward. And then I kind of shake it on there a little bit. And then you always want to curl it all the way, make sure it's all the way on. And then I'm going to take my quick attach right there, hold that, and watch. I get a little bit of throttle, which will help the hydraulics go there. And you'll see those are all the way engaged. 2 ways to check this. You always want to check your attachment before you go, whatever it is. So if I just roll this open and try and push it down, if it wasn't connected, it would pop off. The other thing I can do, again, just looking underneath, this is where a lot of times I'll uncurl it and I can see those pins right there and right there are holding that on, so I know it's connected. And then I'm good to go. Okay, those are basic controls, kind of beginner level for operating a skid steer. Okay, in this video, I'm calling it advanced skills. It's really the next level. If you saw the previous video, it's more beginner, just going over the controls. Now I want to go into a little bit more grading, spreading, things like that. So as I've said with others, I'm not claiming to be an expert. So you're going to see what I do and what I've learned, but I also want to hear comments from operators who do this every day. So now on our site, I'm going to go over grading first. So the biggest thing, again, I'm not going to go over the controls because we just did that in the previous. So if you haven't seen that video, make sure you watch that section. Typically though, for grading, you got to make sure that boom's all the way down. So the way the skid steers are designed is that if you lower that boom to where it stops, the back corner of that bucket is going to be level with the tracks. And that's where you're using that kind of as like a level plane. Then all you're doing is you're rolling. Is the only thing you're doing to manage your grade is you're rolling right or left to manage how much you're cutting into the ground. So like right there, I can see where I started. I was actually on a high spot. So I'm going to back up a little bit. And I'm leaving that boom all the way down, and then I just start driving forward slowly, and I'm going to cut into it. You're almost trying to get some material in the blade or in the bucket, because that's what you're using, almost like a dozer blade, to spread. So you'll see some will drop out, and then I can use whatever material I have there as I'm backing up. This is where if I feel those low spots, I can two things. I can use if I still have it bottomed out, have it all the way, I'll be able to knock some of that, but I can also just see some of the areas that are gonna need material. And I'm kind of shaking it out in there. Like right there, I can feel, I just went and there's a large, shaking that all the way out. Again, always watching where you're backing. So as I see that plane in front of me now, I can see, and again, we're using a handheld camera in some of these if you don't see the best, but I can see I've got piles of material that are there. You know, I've got some holes that are right there, but you're constantly assessing where you're going and trying to get material into that. It's very similar to using a dozer if you ever use one. So now I'm going to do the same thing though. I'm going to drop this all the way down, flatten that blade, and this time I'm going to go over just a little bit because I see there's a lot of material over here. And I'm going to fill that bucket right there. And again, I'm just driving it through. And then again, backing up. I know there's that low spot back here. So right there, I can feel it. So again, assessing what I filled in there. And again, these are just kind of quick and repetitive. You're going back and forth. Flatten that bucket. I can see I'm going to go into a hole there, so. Pulling that up. Can't stress enough backing up in a skid, especially get other people on job site. The newer machines have a backup camera over here. I'm also got a rear view mirror above my head, but looking over your shoulders, things like that. Now again, when you feel those big holes you're going through, that's your time. And you can kind of use the bottom of the blade to still smooth stuff out. If I'm backing up, if I'm not floating the blade, when I'm backing up, if I have it all the way down and I press just a little bit of downward pressure, if you do have any material that's clumped up or anything like that, you're actually gonna kind of trap it. It's a lot like a box blade. You're trapping it behind the back of the blade, the bucket, but then also anything goes under there is gonna get broken up. So that's where you can do a lot of work in reverse too, like that. Again, you'll see it's important. You want that material right in front of your blade. So right there, I don't need to go any further because I can see that hole right there. I'm going to try and pull some material back. Again, setting that blade down. Trying not to spin my track. So as then you're just starting to read your grade. I kind of call it that seat of the pants feel, because whatever you're feeling, what the machine's doing, you can drive through it and you know there's areas there that you have to add material to. So if you actually get the material, again, sometimes if you can float the blade too, but if I have material, it's a little bit of weight, and that'll actually pack down, compact any of those. So I can see there's a low spot right there. So you can see it's starting, I'm starting to fill in all those holes and everything I had ahead of time. Again, obviously we went in for training purposes to kind of tore up the ground. But this is all it is, repetitive back and forth going over there, just taking off little layers of dirt, using the blade to fill in or bucket any holes there. So I'll keep doing some of that to get it roughly to, I call it a rough cut, a rough grade. So now that's just grading. Again, I did some, I don't think there's a video or anyone that's gonna teach you how to be good at that. I call it, it's very similar to a bulldozer. You just gotta get out and do it. I am by no means, again, an expert at this, but the biggest mistakes I've made early is not making sure that boom's all the way down, because that controls the bottom of the back of the bucket, which will make it level with the tracks. If you have that up an inch or two, then what you're doing is you're offsetting from the track level. So you're actually there's no way you can get completely level, because you're always fighting that a little bit with your blade, because your bucket's gonna be a little bit angled. So that's probably the biggest mistake I made early on. I see a lot of new operators making sure all the way down, and then also using the back of that like a box blade. I think that's important. Now, to spread material. So with that, I'm gonna go in, just grab some material. So to spread, we're just gonna do in sand, dirt here, typically it's gonna be gravel. Two different ways on doing that. Obviously you wanna start out as far away from you as you can and work your way backwards. Just because it's easier if you're going out and then cleaning it up as you work your way back. The other thing I'll say, when you come back here, whatever pile you're coming off of, try and make your turns in that one spot at the same time. And what I mean by that is if you're doing a bunch of this all over the job site, you're gonna see from the outside, I am just disturbing, I'm breaking up the ground. And it's not, instead of making all these turns, what you wanna try and do is keep it clean. So wherever your pile you're pulling off of, pull back, try and do a gradual turn so you don't tear up the ground too bad, but then go straight to where you're going without doing as minimal turns. That's gonna avoid tearing up the ground. So with this, the two ways, I'll show you two. So either it's really, the two ways are either dumping forward or reverse. With this, if I'm going backwards, I'm just raising this, and it's really just opening it up, and I can control, and I often will shake the bucket a little bit to try and get an even flow, and I'm just backing up, again, watching where you're going, but trying to just get a nice spread there. And then typically what's gonna happen after you do that, you're either gonna do, let's say, a couple rows of that, and let's say I'll do one more. All you're trying to do is find that one, fill in wherever you're trying to add material to. Try and spread it somewhat evenly. And then eventually, let's say if I spread this all the way out, then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back and go back through the grading. So I'm making sure I'm all the way down. I've got extra material there. And then I'm doing the same thing as I did before. Now I've got extra material that raised some of that area. And then I'm just going through to spread in and hit any of those holes. So this will be the same thing then I'm doing, using the back of the blade. And that's how I can fill some material in there. Now, the other way, if I get in our load of dirt, and I kind of just made a mistake here. Not a big one, but when you're loading, the other thing is if you're gonna spread, it's only gonna spread as even as what's in your bucket. So if you see on this side, see how I picked up a little bit more on the left? I'm over. That's all this means is when I drop, I'm gonna drop more on the left. So if you can control that ahead of time, try and get it even. So if let's do it. So this is where, if you see, I kind of shook it out a little bit and it's a lot more even. That's just gonna help you too when you're spreading. Other way is spreading going forward and then kind of back dragging it out. So if I do this, raise it up, and I'm basically doing the same thing, I'm just going forward. A little bit tougher to see, and I'm not a huge fan of this because unless you know your sight's clear, like I got a bucket right in front of where I'm driving, so it's tougher to see. But then all you're doing is, while I'm doing that, I'm either floating the bucket or just using the back of that box blade, and I'm basically back dragging through it, either floating the blade, which I am now. So you're kind of doing two passes in one there. You're while you're going out to dump, you're then back dragging it out. So that's another way you can do it too. Okay, so again, not clean grade there, but again, just some tips. The best way to learn this: get in the cab, find a practice area, just go out and try and grade. That's the only way you can learn that. Okay, let me get a bucket. Okay, the next thing I want to cover is this center of gravity. You know, skid steers, they are deceivingly, people think because they're smaller, a lot of newer operators think they're safer. The smaller machine, I can't get hurt. I would actually say the opposite. If you're in a 20-ton bulldozer, that thing is gonna be a lot tougher to flip over than maybe a 8,000-pound skid steer. So it's actually the opposite. So you gotta be really careful. Now, number one instant with a skid steer, you'll see with new operators, they'll be driving around with that bucket way up in the sky, fully loaded right there, and they'll be doing this. They'll be driving, they'll be backing up too high, but I can feel right now my whole back end is loose. Just doing that, I can feel it. Typically what happens is they tip forward. Now it is common. I've seen it happen. I've had a new operator do it, someone who's training on our site, and they kind of panic, and that's why I like to practice this a little bit. So as much as that's the most common thing, it's honestly the most easy to recover from. You just can't panic with it. And so what I do, I'm gonna show you an example here. So I have got a full loaded bucket. I kind of put an intentional trench right in front of me because I want to force this to show it what it looks like. And again, if you have a training area, I recommend getting in this position so you're used to it. But if you just raise that bucket up about halfway, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to hold on here. This is also why seatbelt is really, really important. If I just go forward here, what's going to happen is I'm going to do that. And if I pull back, typically at this point, I can use my handheld camera. This is where a new operator is flipping out. They're hitting the gas. I've seen their foot get stuck on the throttle and they're just freaking out because they're sitting there leaning. I mean, this isn't nearly as bad as it could be. I could make it even worse, but it happens on a job site. Now, if you're in this configuration, the first thing, if you get in this position, just calm down, sit tight for a sec, make sure you're held in place, you're fine. And then it's really easy to right yourself. All you really have to do, you're gonna use the boom arm just to pick up that front end. So if I just go down, push right hand forward, and I can start trying to back out of it, and I'm pushing it down. And I'm out of it. At that point, it's probably good to park it, just get out, make sure there's no damage anywhere else if you got in that situation. So again, real easy. I'm gonna use this to dump. Okay, other than that, for center of gravity is just understanding the limitations for your machine going on slopes. Again, if you don't have a bucket, a full load in the front, your counterweight's in the back. So, this is a drastic pile here, so I'm not necessarily gonna be able to even try and get up this. But you'll see how if I go up, if I were to keep pushing this, now this is a bad situation, especially if I raise my bucket up and I'm above my head, this has the potential to roll backwards. Again, it'd be tough to get out of that one, but that's one thing, just making sure where your weight is. So if I was empty like this, best thing to do on these would generally be to go up in reverse. So a lot of times, if you get in this situation where you have to go up a steep hill, you're gonna try and go up like this. Again, this hill is just too much. I'd have to smooth this out a little bit more, but whether you're going on a slope or whatnot, understand your machine and your center of gravity. If you have depending on your attachment, if you have a load of dirt or anything like that, it's important to know that. So again, overall, just understand your center of gravity on your machine. Okay, now let's go over the final piece, this shutdown parking procedure. Now, the number one thing is kind of a mistake I see in a lot of new operators. Skid steers, most of them, the door's in the front. And if you don't have that boom all the way down, you're not able to open the door and your step's not there. So I like to show people, if you were a little bit higher in this is typically what I'll see. They'll park it, safety belt off, shut down the machine, and then they do this, and the machine won't open. And if I use my handheld, you'll see why, because it's actually, the door needs to swing right over that. So, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy that basically has to turn the machine back on. Always make sure, take that off, make sure you're all the way down to the ground, and then you also want to roll that bucket. You should be flat with the ground just for a safety hazard. You don't want to trip and things on that. After that, you let your machine idle. Typically the John Deere, most of them they don't want you to excessively idle them, but there's a turbo and they let it cool down. 30 seconds to a minute is usually what I do. But at that point, I'm also checking while everything's on that my fuel level, if I need to refill it, anything that would get ready for the next day or who's ever going to use it next, if there's any issues. And at that, usually while it's idling down, I'm also checking for trash. Just anything, how you take care of your equipment reflects a lot on the type of work you do. So if you're sharing that machine with others, I always tell people it's really, really important to take out any empty trash, clean anything you can, just make the machine look nice, okay? After that, I am gonna go ahead, hold that stop button on the John Deere here, seatbelt off, flip that safety lock lever off, and then step on out. 3 points of contact when you come out. So after you do that, it's not completely, I like to do a quick walk around. You want to note if there was any damage on the machine at all. So what I will generally do is I'll do a complete walk around on the equipment. And it's also a good time, depending on the company you work for, you might be greasing it. We grease ours about every 10 hours. Some people do it at the beginning, some people do it at the end. There is no right or wrong on that. But again, that might be something there. But after I've done a walk around, then it's just about securing the machine on the job site and calling it a day. So that is the end of the shutdown procedure, and that's also the end of our complete from pre-op all the way to shutdown for a skid steer. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please reach out, comment below. But thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.